Good afternoon. You are now entering Sapo Studios. Frogs and species of all kinds are welcome. Fasten your seatbelt. You are in for quite a ride. Initiating Scratch Track Saturday in 5,
4, 3, 2, 1.
Anonymous. Saturdays.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sapo Studios Scratch Track Saturdays. You got your boy ASAP Froggy. We got the one, the only, Bingus Frog.
Hello. And we are back live from the art department in West Hollywood, California.
We are Sapo Studios. Welcome for our first show of 2024. Thank you for being here on this beautiful Saturday, as I always say. Our goal is to bring the majority of profits and ownership rights back into the hands of artists. We operate under the umbrella of the Notorious Frog NFT project, aka Frogland. Do your own research, but get involved. We are here every Saturday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on X, formerly known as Twitter, and you can go to sapostudios.xyz now, our beautiful website that we collaborated with our artist Dan on to get up, and the great lollihops from the Frogland team helped get our links set up, and it is a gorgeous site. Two different
really
versions,
cool.
One for mobile and one for desktop that we are very proud of. Or I am. I don't know about you.
I am too. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Actually, I just met a guy on the sidewalk, gave him our card.
just met a guy on the side. That sounds
right
very
before
you.
the show. I was like, dude, scan this. Made him sign it. And or made him scan it.
Yeah, we got business cards. We're all set up for the new year. So
It was like,
pretty
this
cool.
is a really cool website.
Yeah.
When you pulled it up. So
it is pretty cool.
Validated us. It felt pretty good.
I do want to shout out if you were listening before the space officially started. We had some Max Pretends playing, who we've had on the show. You can go ahead and check out that episode as well as all of our previous episodes on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. And we ran into Max the other night at the Venice West. He was actually there seeing Ray Isla, who we also had in our show, and we were there to see. And she and her band gave the most amazing live performance. Super awesome that we were able to be there. She's going to be doing more Seattle-based shows in the coming weeks, but definitely be on the lookout for any time she comes back to LA, because she is based out of here now, and I'm sure she'll be doing more shows, and you have to see her live. It's a whole experience. Today, we are here with the great John Armentrout. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Let's turn your mic up a little bit.
I'll get on it here a little bit.
All right, cool. So yeah, super excited to have you in studio. We've talked about you a lot on the show. You're known on Sapo Saturdays as John Guitar.
I have spoke a lot about it, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's
like-
awesome. I've been called worse. So
So yeah, I mean, Dave was the one that, or as we know him here on the show, ASAP, was the first to familiarize himself with your services, and he brought guitars in that you fixed up, came out great.
He brought it back to life, man. I thought it was trash, and I was like about to go buy a new bass. And actually, I had looked up a ton of services, and like there's all these corporate places. You could literally go to Guitar Center, you could go to all sorts of places, and when I saw you and I read the reviews and like just the way people spoke about you, how like literally you treat them as if they're your own instruments, and like you actually get involved in conversation with the people. And I found myself, on the lawn with you, just talking about life after a while. And then it was like,
As you do.
as I do. And I eventually was like, man, you just got to come. This sounds like we're having the podcast, just
right on.
Yeah,
This is great.
and thank God that you found John, because I have a guitar that's in the background of your frame, and it's that black SG Voodoo. It's a Gibson, and it's a beautiful guitar. I was dumb enough in college to lend it to an acting buddy of mine who used it in a bit, and he wasn't using it as an instrument. He was using it as a prop. And why I would let someone use a gorgeous, expensive guitar like that as a prop, I don't know. I'm mental. But he wound up dropping the guitar, and it's wood, and he broke the neck. Now, I got it fixed in New York. and they did a great job, but they did such a good job, I completely forgot that the fucking thing was fixed and that it had been broken ever. So I go to hang it off of one of those wall mounts for guitars that hangs just by the neck, and it snaps again. And I thought it was done for because it was shattered, and I was looking at it like, okay, well, there are certain parts of this thing that are so cool. There's the little ivory skull on the fifth fret, and there's the front bass plate. And maybe I can salvage some of it. And I was like, maybe this guy John can like take part of this guitar and put a new neck on it. And Dave comes back to me after talking to John. He goes, "Oh no, John says he can fix it." And I go, "Bullshit." And he goes, yeah, he's gonna put some metal rods in the back. He's gonna stiff it all
how
up.
confident are you? It was like, this Dave guy is very, very worried about.
Yeah, I'm worried about everything. I'm very neurotic. So, yeah, no, and you were very confident that you could fix it, John. And oh my God, this guitar came back, and you would never know that it was broken to begin with. It was
But
unbelievable.
it's also solid.
That's awesome. When you were describing what had happened, and then David was telling me that you wanted to replace the neck, and I was like, that's like taking the heart out of somebody and then put it in a new heart when you can go, now we could just put a stent in there or something and get it going. So
Well, and what was very interesting was when I came to pick up the guitar, or I don't know if it was when I dropped it off or I picked it up, but I was speaking to you about thinking that the guitar was complete trash because it was broken in such a way that I didn't think it was fixable. And you were saying that a lot of people have that notion when they break an instrument, and there are people that just come to you and say, you know what, if you can fix it, good for you, you can keep it, but I don't want anything to do with it. I smashed the thing and it's garbage. And so you just wind up fixing these things, and you've acquired all these great instruments.
yeah, exactly. And that's the name of my business is John's Guitar Rescue and Repair. And the rescue part of the name, I have to give credit to my wife, because she's like, so many people say that you rescue their instruments. And
You rescued mine.
and she's into dog rescue, so it seemed appropriate. I guess I'm in the guitar rescue. Hers is more of a noble pursuit, but mine's, I guess, more practical. But
So when did your love for music start? I know you're from Chicago. Were you always into music? Was it a passion of yours that kind of came about later in life?
yeah, I was always into, I mean, I grew up in a great era of music, and so me and my friends were always listening to music as kids. And my brother had a junky guitar that he never played, and I tried to play it. And I think that's like where I started getting the seed of like, this can be better because this is garbage. And I saved my own money and ended up buying a guitar. It wasn't like my parents got me into it. My parents really weren't musicians or anything. My mom had a little bit of musical interest, always listened to music, but never really played on a serious level. And I never thought it would be something that I would get into for my life of being a musician and playing. But I was kind of obsessed, as you guys can probably understand how that goes. And
It's a rabbit hole, man.
you know, it's a deep one.
Yeah.
But yeah, the more I played and met other people who played, it was largely self-taught, and especially like playing blues, folk music, and rock and all that stuff, and just asking people, trying to glean any amount of information that I could from people.
And were you someone that was always kind of into electronics and the mechanisms, the way things work? And did you immediately start breaking down these guitars when you got into the whole thing, or did that come later?
That's a great question. It came it came pretty quick, because when I was young, we used to make our own BMX bikes before we knew there was ever such a thing. My brothers and I would take like an old Schwinn Stingray, whatever, with a banana seat and stuff, and we'd convert them. They were garbage, don't get me wrong, but we still did it. We'd spray paint them, and so we were mechanically doing stuff. My dad
And was that just your own ingenuity that you knew how to do that? You were playing with it and you figured out what went where, or how did that?
Yeah.
I mean,
We'd get to
you're not just born with that knowledge.
no, but you just experiment. You just have to go screw up and kind of figure it out. And then I had my first electric guitar was a junky Hohner Les Paul copy, which a guitar shop affectionately named the Moaner.
Oh.
That's how that's and
And that can be a good thing or a bad thing.
And I took one of the right exactly. I took one of the pickups out because it just sounded like garbage. And then my dad helped me solder in a new pickup. I got DiMarzio Super Distortion, and a buddy of mine still has that guitar. It's in his brother's basement, but I sold it to my buddy Joe back in the 80s, and it still exists. And he goes, it's in pieces, but it's still there. So that was kind of where I got started. And
again, just this idea of like, this isn't, something that everyone does necessarily. You said your dad helped you solder it in. So you just had a soldering kit in the house, and that was a staple of your family growing up, or once you got into, repairing guitars, then it was like, okay, I need a soldering kit and I need to be able to do this sort of thing.
Well, luckily my dad had the knowledge of how to solder, because I told him I wanted to do this. He's like, okay, we're going to have to solder it. And luckily he had an idea he never worked on guitars before, or even played a guitar, but he knew that, okay, this is what we follow directions. This is how we do it.
What did he do for work?
He worked he was what was called a traffic manager. He would manage, shipments incoming, outgoing for a company that made glass structures, actually a lot of greenhouses and stuff like that. So he was basically in charge of shipping and managing whatever had to go on with things that were getting sent.
So not really an engineering background in terms of soldering and taking things apart, putting them together. So that was more of a hobby.
But he's a very bright guy, and actually the company wanted to hire him as an engineer because
no
he
kidding.
just had that kind of mind. Never really had a formal education beyond high school, but just probably one of the smartest guys I ever known. He could figure out stuff, and maybe I got a little bit of that from him, maybe a lot. But yeah, so and he was encouraging me to kind of do this stuff. And I mean, the way I got into working on guitars, I played my first gig when I was 16. Didn't know what the hell I was doing. And the gig was going horrible. And then the cops ended up coming. They didn't break it up. They actually hung out for a while. And everyone thought we were great. And I thought we were terrible, which is something that's continued with me for my entire life. I don't like anything that I play, but that's just how it goes. You're like, oh, you like it? Awesome.
Yeah.
But
you know what? That's the plight of a lot of artists. It's hard to watch your own material or listen to your own material. I hate the way my voice sounds, and all I do on this show is talk.
So you have that fan in freaking Kansas, man. That guy.
Yeah, I do have that one fan in Nebraska.
Nebraska.
That's where it is. Yeah.
But yeah, at the gig, like towards the end of the gig, I was having problems, and the other guitar player was yelling at me, and I didn't know what was wrong with my guitar. I just knew I couldn't tune it. It didn't sound right, whatever, we were done. And the next day I was looking at my guitar and I went to play it, and I realized the low E string was just hanging kind of off the guitar, and it didn't literally break. It started to kind of eviscerate. And so looking at it, it's like, oh, and it was like, that was my first lesson on teching your own gear and making it work, because it's like, no one's going to do it for you. And this happened. And it's like, okay. So from then on, it was like my first gig. A lot of people learn this later in life when they're, playing at the Troubadour or something, and they break a string and they're like, oh shit, but what can I do about this? So I became very aware of working on guitars. So I started stringing them and stringing my buddies' guitars and things like that. And people, when I was teaching lessons, people started bringing me instruments to work on. Or like,
and when you were playing music back in the day, and you were talking about when you were 16, you were doing these live gigs. Were you doing cover songs, or were you and the guys writing any of your own music?
We played cover songs. We were writing our own crappy songs, but. But when we would get in public, we were smart enough to do the stuff that the people wanted. So
what brought you over to LA from Chicago?
Music. I came out here in the mid '80s to go to school at Musicians Institute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's that.
And what was the focus of your studies there?
Mainly, I came out here. I wanted to learn more about jazz. And which was kind of a mistake. I love jazz and stuff, but it's not really where I'm at musically with things.
How do you mean? Yeah.
So meaning that it's like my heart's more in rock and blues and things like that. And I wish I would have known that before I started. I don't regret having done it, because I met some cool people and stuff. But I think my time would have been better spent going for the things that.
Do you ever find that any of that transitions over into the other genres? Because my first inclination is thinking of someone like John Mayer, who has, I feel like, a very, yes, bluesy, but also kind of a jazzy background and that jazzy improvisational sound. And a lot of that kind of filters into his rock.
Absolutely. And he's a great example. He went to the Berklee School of Music, and they have a very jazz-heavy education there. And you could definitely hear it. And having any kind of knowledge in anything. I played classical guitar for 10 years. Any of that stuff helps. anything that, but you have to get to the point where you almost have to throw it all out and kind of use your instincts, trust what you're doing.
So were you thinking that you might pursue music as a career when you were, studying and learning all of the intricacies of not only playing music, but music theory and how everything breaks down?
Yeah, I mean, I had the wild notion at one point of wanting to be a studio guitarist. And,
Okay.
and especially like this, now LA was the place.
Yeah.
It was the epicenter for that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I wasn't so naive to think that you just jump into this kind of thing. It doesn't work that way. But I
It's
thought,
very
well,
niche. It's like very hard.
yeah, exactly. And even then, a lot of guys who play on the road and stuff will come off the road just because they know producers or someone will ask them to record something. And they're like, hey, you're good at this. And but I figured I had to be here at least to find out. It's like you don't know unless you try.
Right.
And so I moved out here on my own when I was 22 and was living over on Orange Drive there, just north of Hollywood
Oh, wow.
Boulevard. Yeah.
Cool.
What an interesting place. I don't think I slept for a year. I mean, there was cops and helicopters.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
people
welcome to LA, right?
People wielding and firearms, and it was just crazy in the 80s.
Yeah.
Man, it was nuts. And then we ended up moving over to Yucca and Las Palmas, which is even crazier.
Yeah.
And I later found out that like Cherokee Avenue was like the crack capital of the world at that point.
Oh wow.
Yeah, well, I always had this perception. Yeah, how was
We had the hookers on our side over on Las Palmas, I guess, so people would do the roundabout. They'd go up, go down Cherokee, get some crack, and then they'd come over. by
crack
us.
first, then hooker.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Well, you got to have your priorities.
Right. Yeah.
Got to justify everything.
Well, it's funny you say that because when I first moved out to California, I'm from New York and I had this notion of Hollywood that it's the glitz and the glamour that you see in the movies and especially Hollywood Boulevard and
not-
the Walk of
not
Fame.
it. It's
And you
not
go to
it.
Hollywood Boulevard by the Walk of Fame after 6 p.m. and it is the
I still till
grungiest.
this day, I just want to go home. I
Yeah,
like
take a
it.
shower and
I'll love it.
put your bulletproof vest on if you're gonna go back.
I don't
Yeah.
love it. But I did want to ask because the idea of like taking everything knowledge wise about music and then at some point throwing it by the wayside and having to trust your instincts. That's a lot of what we talk about on the show is being a vessel in those moments. Like, how have you been able to reach that throughout playing guitar?
It's one of the it's a hard thing because at least for me, because I'm curious about everything, and sometimes that you're talking about going down the rabbit hole. I felt like sometimes that I went. It's learning anything is not a waste of time, but I also think it saturated my focus where I was just ADD is too much, and after my son was born, I had time to. I had an Ovation acoustic guitar I'd have in the corner, and I'd play songs for him for like 7 minutes until he had to do something with him. He's a baby, and so I had these little pieces of time to play, and I didn't have time to practice. And that kind of brought me all the way back to how I started playing guitar, which was like cowboy chords,
Right.
and playing. So all of a sudden I started playing, like got back into blues and playing a little bluegrass and some folk music and stuff, and making up songs for him, which he would laugh. He loved my stupid comedy songs, and it kind of like the less is more kind of thing. Like keep it simple. It's like get a good sound and start there.
Yeah.
So were you when did you decide to kind of transition from okay, I'm going to be a musician to I'm going to fix other people's instruments?
It was
Or were you kind of doing them simultaneously and you just leaned into
that's more the second part's more because at one point my wife went to school in Wisconsin, so we had decided that we were going to get married. I was living here, so I moved back there. And our idea was I was going to move back there for her senior year. She was in Whitewater, Wisconsin. And then we're going to get married and moved here, which is exactly what we did. When I was back there, all I did for a living was teach, because people were what are you going to do for a job? And there was kids that they're mostly rural farm kids that hadn't been even more than 60 miles from their house. And here it is. I had lived in Hollywood and knew people like Paul Gilbert and stuff. And my roommate Johnny Monaco is a great guitar player. So having someone like me who knew metal and stuff like that was just like they loved it. And so I started fixing some more of their guitars just to get through lessons sometimes, because like, dude, how can you play this? You can't. I mean, this is horrible. So I don't know if you guys know like about the Floyd Rose tremolo system.
No, tell us about it.
It's just a device that came. Eddie Van Halen is the one who popularized it from the late '70s, and it's basically a tremolo. Are you guys aware like of the Stratocaster? It's
Yeah.
called a tremolo. It's actually a vibrato, but they call it a tremolo. Well, anyway, it's just a souped up version of that where they lock down the strings so you can go crazy. Like, so you hear a lot of the crazy guitar playing from the 80s. They're all using like a Floyd Rose style tremolo because it keeps the guitar in tune. It allows you to go nuts and do the dive bombs and all that stuff, and you don't go out of tune. Well, a lot of these kids had that because they saw their guitar heroes playing those and had no idea how to set them up. And not that I necessarily had an idea to set them up, but I had a better idea than they did. So I would sit there in a guitar lesson and spend 20, 25 minutes of a half-hour lesson trying to get their guitar in shape to play. And I guess I did a good enough job where all of a sudden these kids' friends were calling me. They're like, yeah, you fixed my friend's Floyd Rose. Can you fix mine?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I got really good at it.
Well, you know,
That's really awesome. And you are really good at
yeah,
like,
and a couple of interesting things for me. You know, first, I didn't know that. You know, you could bring a guitar in like a bicycle to get tuned up, and it becomes like almost a totally different instrument. So in addition to my Gibson that the neck had broken, Dave was like, you know, why don't you bring in your acoustic? I bet John will fix it up for you.
Just do a setup. Yeah,
and I was
it was
like,
always going out of
I'm not really sure what I need for this thing, but okay, I'll bring it in. If he can do something with it, spiff it up, great. So I brought it in, and I mean, night and day when I played it afterwards, it sounded gorgeous. And I didn't even know it could make those sounds, you know what I mean? And so it's like you really can tune up an instrument to make it a completely different instrument almost. Yep. So that was kind of wild to me.
Absolutely. And that's where I go back to where the guy at the shop was making fun of my moaner and laughing. And I had a warped neck and stuff, but he set it up and recommended strings for me. And it played way better than that was the last time I paid for a setup.
Yeah.
That was,
well, and the other interesting thing to me was, you know, Dave was kind of telling me that after a conversation he had with you, you were kind of alluding to the fact that a lot of these instruments, they're all the same when they come out of the factory initially. And the ones that are more expensive, they just kind of have actual hands on them. And after they're manufactured from the line, someone comes in and fine tunes it. And you could really take one of these, let's say, you know, because Fender, for instance, will popularize a $300 guitar that people can go out and buy and afford, as opposed to getting like a $1,500 guitar. And you're saying you can kind of take one of those $300 guitars and turn the sound into the 1500, right?
Absolutely. And especially with electric guitars. You have so many options, especially now. Like we're swapping out the pickups or something. I mean, even with a Fender, you can, if you want to, you can replace the neck. You were talking about replacing the neck on your SG would be tough. Doing it on a Fender's not that hard. Yeah. So and that was part of when Leo Fender started making those guitars. That was his thought. It's like, if you don't like the neck, man, we'll sell you another one. And it didn't really work out that way, but they're very modular kind of instruments, and you can kind of fashion it to make it work for you. And I'm not going to say that, you know, a $2,000 guitar is the same as a $300 guitar, but I have played $300 guitars after we've worked on them, and people, you know, it's instruments are like people. They're all individual. Some are good or bad, and just because something is $4,000 doesn't mean it's like a great instrument.
Yeah, I mean, you even see that, you know, in other industries. You see that with wine. A $10 bottle of wine can sometimes be better than a $400 bottle of wine. It's rare, but it happens. Yeah. And people do these blind taste tests. My dad was talking about one where he went over to his friend's place that's got this whole wine cellar, and they did a blind taste test, and everyone loved this really cheap bottle compared to this really expensive bottle. That shit happens.
Right. And I mean, and it's like wine. It's an organic thing. It's wood. It used to be part of a tree. And I remind people of that sometimes when they get frustrated.
I actually loved that you said that, because you were like, this is literally like part of a tree and was just carved. And I was like, huh. And that's when you were explaining about how you'd fix Dave's Gibson, and you were like, we could just add this wood here if this all fails. Well, you were even such a good guy that you were like, I'm so confident that I would take the price off of the next fix if this were to break. And,
Yeah, I mean,
and
if
I don't think that's
ever
what's
there
gonna-
were a promotion for a business that everyone should flock to, it's John's Guitar
Rescue
Rescue and
and
Repair.
Repair, yeah.
Because let me tell you something. Not only is this the sweetest man I've ever met, but he does a phenomenal work. His prices are unbeatable. It was remarkable. But
I appreciate that. Thank you.
absolutely, man. I appreciate you. And to that end, where you say that the guitar once was a tree, I was actually thinking, leading up to you saying that, now that you know the intricacies of taking apart and putting back together these instruments, I'm sure, because I've seen videos where people take like bricks of Legos and put strings on the front of them, and then that's a guitar, and a can of this, and what. Can you make anything into a guitar?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there's metal guitars. There's a guy, James Trussart, and I think he's still here in the LA area, but he makes these wonderful guitars made out of sheet metal.
So do you personally make any sort of Frankenstein guitars at your house?
I tweak guitars and do stuff to them, yeah. But there's people who have made guitars out of carbon fiber.
Carpet fiber.
No, carbon.
Oh, carbon fiber. I was like, wait.
Nowadays, could come from a carpet fiber?
Yeah, right.
I don't know, but there's a company, Rainsong, that all their guitars are carbon fiber guitars.
That's
there's bass companies that make basses, bass necks out of carbon fiber. So that whole space tech kind of idea of going into guitars. I mean, you look at a lot of guitar. It's funny, especially with the electric guitar designs, they haven't really changed since the 50s.
Right.
They've improved components and stuff like that. Like talking about the Floyd Rose tremolo, it's still based on a Fender style Strat tremolo. But even then, like the guitars, the names Telecaster, it's like it evokes those kind of, you're thinking of cars with fins on them and stuff like that. And it just turns out that they made them basically the right way, kind of, when these guys Leo Fender wasn't a player. He would kind of a little bit like me, or a lot more than me, tinker with stuff. And he originally started making amplifiers after World War II. And then they were making lap steel guitars, Hawaiian lap steels. And then those weren't selling anymore. So they got this idea about doing a solid, like I look at your bass, a P bass, and the original designs from 1949, doing a solid body bass with frets. Right. It was like, holy crap, you can't do that. What do you mean? Basses are these big things with F holes and really hard to play. And he called it a precision bass because the intonation would be precise on them. And it changed the world. And then they started putting that thinking towards guitars.
It makes me wonder, because
really
it is really cool. And you talk about how the instrument has been very much the same in terms of the electric guitar for a very long time. The design hasn't really changed. I wonder, in terms of updating the instrument itself and making it more efficient, have they come out with something where the pedals are kind of inside the guitar, so to speak, so that it's just kind of buttons, so you don't have to bring a whole pedal setup? Because I would think that would be kind of the next iteration of efficiency.
They were doing that in the 60s.
No kidding.
They started doing that in the 60s. Fuzz circuits and things on guitars with that look like a blender or something with switches all over them and stuff. And they kind of worked. In the 70s, people started taking the guts of an MXR super distortion or distortion pedal and putting them in guitars for preamps. And then the 80s, the 80s was kind of the pinnacle of all of that kind of stuff. The cool thing is it's right on your guitar. The negative thing is that if it breaks or you want to tweak your sound, which inevitably all of us do, if you do this for any certain amount of time, we're always chasing tone. That's the whole thing. Well, if I only had this, if I only had this Marshall stack and with this guitar and these pedals and this preamp and wait, there's a better thing that comes out. Right. And the industry kind of feeds on that. We're having the NAMM show coming up here in I think next week out in Anaheim, 2 weeks maybe. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's all about that. And
actually, Ray Isla, a guest on our show, she's going to play at NAMM.
Yep, she's going to be there representing Eastman Guitars, which is very cool. I was talking to her about how I had been to the NAMM show in the past, and that is such a cool expo. When I was there, Dick Dale was there, and he was doing, I think Waterloo was his, his surf rock song that he was famous for. But it was really cool.
Yeah, Miserloo.
Oh,
Yeah.
Miserloo, not Waterloo, Miserloo. Yeah. But there were a lot of
Waterloo is a seltzer company.
Right. And I just saw that the other day. That's why it was in my brain. But yeah, no, there were just a lot of like musicians I recognized from major bands walking around, and that NAMM Expo is awesome. It's like all of these companies coming in with their newest innovations, and as much as these instruments have stayed very much the same, there are all sorts of really cool accessories that they come out with now, and all sorts of little innovations that make playing just a little bit cooler.
Well, yeah.
So
Totally.
Yeah, you look at all the modeling and stuff that you can do with guitar or anything, where you're plugging into a box and you have access to 200 different amps or whatever. That stuff has gotten a lot better.
yeah.
I started messing with that stuff when it first came out. But man, the power and how they've refined things with it is incredible.
So to kind of rewind, when you were talking about wanting to be a session musician and do the studio recordings, did you just feel like you couldn't break in to that niche sector, or what happened with that?
Frankly, I just wasn't good enough to do it. I mean, that doesn't mean I wasn't a good player, but to sit there, put a chart in front of you, and it's like, go.
Right.
We're doing this, aside from just the barrier to entry to something like that, and understanding what it took. I did sessions for people, people working on jingles and things like that, or people working on records, or working with friends of mine. So I got experience doing sessions, but to actually make it into a living is very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to a lot of artists that really want to break into the industry, are fantastic musicians, whether it be singers or instrumentalists, and they have a very hard time breaking in and making a living off of it. It's one of the things we talk about with respect to the whole NFT thing. I don't know how familiar you are with NFTs, but that's kind of the whole idea with that is giving people that might not otherwise have the opportunity, an opportunity to somehow break in. Before we continue, I'm going to go ahead and reset the room. You should put money in the meter.
Hey, thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. We are Sapo Studios. Thank you for being here with us on this beautiful Saturday. Our goal is to bring the majority of profits and ownership rights back into the hands of artists. We operate under the umbrella of the Notorious Frog NFT project, aka Frogland. Do your own research, but get involved. We are here every Saturday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on X, formerly known as Twitter, doing our live shows, and you can catch the replays by going to sapostudios.xyz. We're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube, we're all over the place, Instagram. So you can catch us anywhere that you intake your content, and we hope that you like, follow, subscribe, comment, all that stuff so that we can continue to grow. We're here with John Armentrout today, who is just a fascinating guy, has revived some of the most broken instruments known to mankind. And as we were saying earlier, people often think that their instruments are never coming back to life, and John proves otherwise. So that's pretty awesome. I'm wondering, you pivoted from kind of pursuing the career in music to teaching music. Now, you say that you weren't good enough to be the session musician, and that doesn't mean you weren't good. And I imagine that with the schooling that you talked about having in music, and just how much time you spent around the instruments, that you're probably great. Now, that being the case, is teaching frustrating? Because I'd imagine that, especially with beginners, it's like you want to just bang your head against the wall watching these people try to futz around with the instrument and find their way.
That part of it, that's not really frustrating. I guess the part that's frustrating, frankly, is is people's lack of dedication to it.
I knew you were gonna say that because nobody wants to practice.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's like, well, I'm not getting better. And it's like, you don't have to take lessons from me or anybody else, but if you don't play it, I guarantee you won't get better.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Mark Cuban is famous for a lot of things, but one of the quotes he's most famous for is the 10,000 hours, that, if you really want to be good at something, I think that was Mark Cuban, that you have to put in that you come back chewing. You're trying to be covert there. You got a whole meal going on outside the show, huh, Dave? Busted.
Had a little snack.
Yeah, you had a little snack. But yeah, so Mark Cuban, I think, was the one that said, you know, if you put in your 10,000 hours, that's when you're really going to find success and be good at something. And you have to be willing to dedicate that time and energy to that thing to be able to be that good. And yeah, I feel like that's just the case. People get frustrated with not progressing in whatever it is they're studying and trying to learn. And it's like, well, if you don't put in the time, you're not going to get better. It's just a fact.
I tell people, if you think about this, if you're working an 8-hour a day full-time job, you work about 2,000 hours a year. And it's like, so that 10,000 hours, that's 5 years of a full-time job. If you were to look at it that way.
Dedicating your life most of the time to something that you're not really passionate about, giving them all of that time and energy, leaving nothing left in your reservoir for yourself.
There's actually something really interesting that I was watching on, I think his name's Anthony Huberman, with David Goggins yesterday, where, or Andrew Huberman, where there's a center in your brain that actually grows when you do things that you don't want to do. And that's like where the center of like willpower sits. So you can actually like grow.
Increase the amount of willpower you can have.
By doing things that you don't actually want
I like
to do.
that.
Which is super interesting. So it's like if you were, he gave an example. He's like, if you go to the gym and you're like maxing out and, you know, but you love doing that, you're actually not growing that part of your brain at all because you're doing something hard, difficult, but you enjoy doing it. So it's got to be something that you don't really like to do. And that made me trigger back to something I heard 10 or 15 years ago from an old boss that was saying successful people do what they don't want to do most of the time, which is so interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
and
you
like
know,
just that what I heard last night has made me like rethink like everything we do as artists.
well, I was thinking when you were saying that about an interview I believe I heard with Louis C.K. where he was talking about, you know, you want to be uncomfortable because that means you're doing the right thing. He's like, you know, as successful as I've ever been, I've never felt comfortable in any of this. I've been in a position of discomfort, but knowing that I have to kind of trudge through and that there's a purpose to all of this and a greater meaning to it, and I'm supposed to be here. And there is definitely something to that. You need to step outside your comfort zone in order to find that success.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would recommend if you're an artist, musician, get in front of people. It'll scare the crap out of you. You talk about being uncomfortable. It's tough. And by nature, I'm not a person that I'm not an extrovert. I'm not a type A. And my wife asked me, she's like, why do you do this? And then I read an interview with Paul McCartney where at this age, he's like 80 years old now, maybe 81. He says he still feels the same way. And I don't think it's one thing to get comfortable with your craft and how you're doing it and everything. It's another thing to altogether that if you're not normally in like public speaking, I don't know if you guys are Seinfeld fans.
Love Seinfeld.
Right. So
I'm Jewish. I'm from New York. I love Seinfeld.
Right. Okay. So
for you.
So he has that whole thing about, he talks about, it was at the end of one of the episodes where they had a funeral. He said, 60, essentially he was saying 2/3 of people would rather be dead than giving a eulogy.
That's probably true.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so you guys know, because you're out, you're doing things. And if you don't have that little bit of nervousness in there, then you're not doing it right. But you realize like the rewards and the joy of having done it are huge, but you have to get yourself out there.
Well, yeah, and that 10,000 hours idea applies to a lot of different things in terms of training yourself, practicing, becoming better at things, and even something like that. It's the more you do it, the better you're going to be at it. I think of last night I was at this album release party, and we have our friend and fellow musician Guapo in the audience here watching our show today. Friend of the show. And no, last night it was very cool. It's like this huge mansion in the Hollywood Hills. As you go to the lower level outside, you find this door and you hear loud music thumping in there, and you open the door and it's just this tiny room with a live band playing. It was super cool, and that's awesome. Yeah, and you did not expect it to be there when you open the door. We go in there, and at some point they're playing something that Guap feels like the rhythm on, and he grabs a mic, and the guys there that are playing the instruments, they give the head nod, and he just starts rapping and freestyling. And it's something that he looked like anyone that was meant to do something and so comfortable, like the entire room like lit up and people are like filming him and he was just in his element. And he's at that point where he can just pick that up and do that in any environment because he's put in all of that time getting out there and doing shows. And, you know, even if I've been at some of his shows way back, and even when he doesn't necessarily get the crowd that he wants, he still gives the full performance, the full show. And that's sometimes, in my opinion, because I've done stand-up comedy to small crowds, that's the scariest thing. Totally. When you're in a room of like not that many people, you're not that comfortable with you know, being in front of people to begin with, maybe, or maybe you are, but to have that small amount of people, maybe they're not super receptive to what you're doing, and you still have to just act like it's a full room that's vibrating and give your all. That's a tough thing. So you have to put in that time to get that comfort level.
Yeah, and we would say anyone who's performed and at a higher level will tell you, it's like when you're in that kind of environment where it's raining out and only 3 people showed up for your gig. It's like you take a deep breath and it's like, we're gonna rock the hell out of these people.
That's right.
They're gonna go back to their friends and like, dude, you should have been there, man. These guys were awesome. And that's all you can do.
And that's when you know that someone's like really an awesome performer, when they are able to pull off an awesome show in that kind of an environment where there's nothing being given to them and they're giving it all to whoever is there. That's epic.
Right. We've all been to numbers, you know, lots of gigs and stuff, and especially around here, nothing worse to me than seeing a band or something, and they sound great, they're kicking, they got energy, and between every song, the singer's just complaining about his monitor mix, and you're like, shut the, just play. You guys sound great. Just keep doing it.
Yeah,
it happens, and it's like they're not here to. You know, people aren't here to hear you complain. We want energy.
Right.
And okay, so you're having a bad day at the office. This is your office. Deal with it.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
And the more you can kind of make yourself comfortable in that environment, it's like, you know, there's no such thing as a musical emergency. The patient's still breathing, and then when you can take a step back a little bit, because we all get flustered. You're in a new environment, stuff's not working. That's where I come in. I can help. And
you're just the guy that's just like, people are freaking out and you're just like, dude, just
super calm.
Just
right.
Show's gonna go on. We're gonna get through this.
Everything really is relative, right? And people freak out about what is specific to them in their industry, in their moment, whatever, right? So I think back to when I was waiting tables with this guy over here, and someone might be freaking out that like table 15 hasn't gotten their chicken nuggets for the little kid. It's like, this is not like heart surgery. You know what I mean? The kid is going to eat. Everything's going to be fine. But people treat, you know, small things like they're explosions in their lives because in that moment it feels like
and
the
you know
biggest
how
thing.
it gets bigger when you feed into it.
Yeah.
So you can't feed into their.
Well, you never had that problem.
Nah. That's what I'm saying. It's like you got to be like John.
Yeah,
and
that's what you're saying.
Yeah, be calm in those situations.
All right, so I want to put a guitar in your hands, and I want to talk a little bit about music, and I want to talk about kind of where someone starts with you when they start with lessons. So, ASAP, if you can get a Logic pulled up so that we can hear the instrument, I'm gonna go ahead and take my headphones off and walk over and grab the guitar here. But I guess I would be wondering, you know, when I was first taking guitar lessons, my first inclination, which I feel is a lot of people's first inclination, is to learn the songs that you love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's all I used to do when I would go to guitar lessons. It was like, hey, can you teach me this song this time? Can you teach me this song this time? And he was like, dude, at some point, you could just do it on your own, and I want to teach you stuff.
Well, it's not only you could do it on your own, but
and I was like, nah, I'm not coming back to you, man.
Well, but it's not only you could do it on your own, it's also a sense of like, at some point, if you're learning something to begin with, you do need to learn some of the fundamentals, right? You need to learn some scales, you need to learn some basic songs, walk before you can run.
You want to know what the funny part about that is that you're supposed to learn all that shit and then throw it out by the wayside and then just rely on yourself at some point,
You're
which
not
is so
supposed to
interesting.
completely throw it out the window. It's supposed to not be the driving force of your instrumentation, but it's still supposed to be there as the support system for whatever you're doing.
I always use the example, especially with kids, of playing sports, because most kids have played soccer or baseball or whatever. And it's like, if you're playing baseball, it's like if you had to think about every muscle you're using to swing a bat, you wouldn't swing a bat for an hour. You see the ball coming and you swing it. Now maybe you're not swinging it well, or like a major league or whatever, but you react. And ultimately, I guess that's what we're saying. You want to get to the point. Now, all that work that goes in the 10,000 plus hours, hopefully will set you up for doing that and reacting and being able to take a deep breath and play.
Well, yeah, I mean, because, similarly, if you had to think about every breath you were ever going to take, you'd die.
Exactly. So you kind of wanted, and it's funny. I feel like with guitar, because I've been thinking a lot lately about the whole 10,000 hours thing, and it's absolutely true. But I almost feel it because guitar is hard. I mean, we don't really talk about that aspect.
It is a very difficult instrument. Yeah.
It's hard. And I feel like the 10,000 hours is almost like a barrier to entry. It's like when you get to your 10,000 hours, it's like now you're ready to start doing some stuff.
Yeah.
Now you put in the next 10,000 hours.
Well, and it is one of those things where it's daunting, and just like I know we're doing a lot of analogies today, but
I love analogies.
yeah, but
like
just
cooking.
like
It's like
just like skiing, where it's like if you really want to get into the sport, you still have to get through wearing all of the equipment, suiting up with the boots and the jacket, and you have to be like mentally prepared to put yourself through all of that shit just to get on the mountain. And then you have to start learning stuff. And it's like, I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like that gearing up to the moment when you're actually able to start doing things. That there's a lot involved in that. And getting to that place can be very daunting.
Totally.
Yeah, I learned how to ski, and it was, as an adult, it was painful. I actually got pretty good at it, but yeah.
But the
Skiing on ice at Big Bear. It's almost no
that'll do
That's
it.
Dave's
Yeah.
favorite.
Yeah.
That's like East Coast skiing. You love it.
Right. Yeah, you learn to deal with it, right?
But all right, so let's you have Logic open, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So
see
if
if
you
you
can
can hear
open
it.
the tuner up so we can get this guitar tuned, because I'm sure it's not in tune since the last time I used it. And what I love about this is that there's a very AC/DC sound coming off the guitar right now, and you've got the Angus Young hat on.
I don't know if you can see that
Killer.
screen there. You can probably tune by.
Yeah, we've got the tuner up on the screen if yeah. All right. Close enough. So we are all pretty much tuned up. So where do you start with someone that comes in, wants to learn how to play music? Maybe you tell them, shut up with your wanting to learn Van Halen now because you can't even play a scale. And let's start with some basics. Is it hot cross buns?
Is it smoke on the water?
All of the above. Oh, well, the interesting thing is someone really does have an interest in learning guitar. You guys know there's a million things on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
There's more people. I mean, and a lot of it's junk, frankly.
Yeah, I was gonna say you get lost, and learn some bad tips.
Right. But I'll tell people, and you were mentioning about talking about playing songs that you like, that it's not a bad way to start. And so I'll tell somebody, if they've never played guitar before, I'll say, go get in trouble first.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything I would tell you, me or anybody else, it's like, it's all going to be brand new. But if you can go and struggle and try to do some chords or something, or strum, then when you come to someone like me, then I have something to work with. Because now,
Right.
So how do you hold a
How do you
pick?
do this? Yeah.
Right.
Or we got to this point, and this is where. Yeah.
And I can't emphasize enough. We're all just like the instruments are individuals. So are we. So where everybody has their own thing. People are like, well, my hands are too small, my hands are too big, or there's always reasons why you can't do
They
something.
make smaller guitars.
Right. Right.
They do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen, I mean, someone like Sheryl Crow's tiny, and she's playing a big old Gibson.
Yeah.
And my buddy Rich would point out to people, it's like, she's tiny. And
Yep.
you're talking to a guy who's like 6'5", and it's like,
Well, it goes.
dude, come on.
It goes back into that idea of not wanting to struggle through those moments. You know, you can stretch your hands like that if you've got smaller hands, but no one wants to take the time to actually learn those things and implement them into their play.
Right, exactly. So I'd like to, and to me, if someone's actually willing to go online and try and learn something, then they kind of want to do it.
Right.
Yeah,
And
they've
they're-
taken at least a first step.
Right, because there's you could tell with some people that they think it's a lot easier than it is. Like, oh, this is like
Especially if they've played Guitar Hero before. Everyone that plays the video game Guitar Hero thinks, "Oh, okay,
I got this."
I
It's
bet I
like,
could play
oh, man,
guitar.
that's hard.
Easy.
Yeah,
Just pressing a couple buttons."
it's like I'm doing it, so any idiot can do it.
Right.
but yeah, so if people are willing to actually kind of stick their neck out and try and learn something, and it's like, okay, and learning songs that you like is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
It really is. But I'll tell somebody, it's like, if you're just coming to me, and because I used to teach a lot of songs, but it's like, there again, you can go to YouTube or any of these guitar apps and learn this stuff.
Right.
What I can help you do is sharpen up your technique.
Okay.
How practice routines and things like that. How to pick, how to
So
play.
show us, and I'm going to take the
Okay.
microphone from you when you're ready. For a beginner, where would you have them start in terms of the basics that you want them to be practicing to start to gain some of those fundamentals?
Number one, tuning the guitar.
Okay.
Just like we
Yep.
sat here and you put the tuner up.
And is
That-
that
that's
something
a-
that you
that's
should
a
be
big
able to
one.
do by ear, or it's just about recognizing how to tune with a machine?
Tuning is a lifetime pursuit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And without getting into the weeds on physics and how the tempered scale works and stuff, guitars, pianos, anything that has frets like this, for the most part, they're not completely in tune across the neck. And that,
Ever.
that
Just not gonna work that.
there's certain intervals that aren't going to work as well. This is an artificial construct, having it in equal half steps. But what it allows us to do is to play in any key, anywhere, at any time. It used to not be that way. And essentially, when you hit a note, when I hit this E note, it's kind of hard to hear. But there are other notes inside of that E note that aren't E. That are natural notes that come in, harmonics that come in above that E note. And that's essentially how they started putting together the major scale, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, was based on these intervals and how they kind of started figuring out how to lay out a scale. But it wasn't really until maybe the late 17th century, early 18th century, where they started really dividing up the octave into equal exact half steps, because you could play an old what was called a forte piano or piano forte, depending on the instrument, that was tuned naturally. And so if you're playing in keys like C, C, F, G, keys that were kind of close to the key of C, they would sound okay. But as soon as you started wandering farther away from that, the more out of tune you were. And so when people sing, generally will sing the correct pitch, meaning that, and I'll show you for a second.
I'm going to hold this up to your mouth so you can do
Thank
this
you.
while you're playing.
Yeah, so there's any distance between one note to another is called an interval. Okay, so there are certain ways that intervals work, where we have octaves. It's this similar note, but it's different because one note's higher and one note's lower, but they're the same note. So those notes vibrate at the same speed, the higher one being doubles the speed, to put it simply.
Oh, wow.
But there are other intervals in between there, like let's say we'll call this a major third, like this kind of sound.
Like that slight dissonance.
They're dissonant, and this one's actually major intervals are really a consonant, kind of happy sounding. Here's
Right.
minor interval. Well, these intervals in this kind of system are actually out of tune. They should be, a major interval should be a little flatter, and a minor interval should be slightly sharper. but we can get away with those. Where it gets harder is when you get into dissonant notes. That's where the tuning actually has to be more accurate. So when you have a good piano tuner, they're tweaking the notes little bits so they can work well together, because you'll hear them going through and tuning with a tuning hammer, and they're adjusting. And like I said, I don't want to go in the weeds on this stuff.
Right. I mean, but that is
more intricate than people.
Yeah,
ever
that sounds like
imagined.
its own art form.
Yeah.
So some people will say, well, it's like, well, you set up my guitar and it's out of tune, and I'll watch what they're doing or how they're doing it. So one suggestion I have, one of the things I do, especially on acoustic guitar, because acoustic guitars lack these mechanical adjustments you can make on the fly, like this electric guitar does. One thing I do is I'll tune to notes. So I'll tune all the strings like I just did, looking at the tuner, and then I'll go to this A on the 5th fret on the high string, and I'll look at the tuner for that. And if it's a little sharp, I'll tune it down. Right. So I'm kind of tempering a tempered scale, even a little bit more.
So you're not just tuning the string open. You're adding the like, I don't know what you would even call that. You're shortening the string because you're pushing the fret.
Right. And I'm using this as a reference. So I'll go, and then I'll check this last one, G on the low string.
Because actually, when you gave me my bass back, I was tuning it, and then that's the first time I've ever done it. I played on the 12th string, the open note, to see how it showed up on the tuner. And when it was a little bit off, I was like, if I'm turning the pin and then I play it open, does that make it off on the open note? Or that's why you're saying you're kind of like splitting the difference almost?
You're splitting the difference, and a lot of people just assume they'll come when they look at their guitars after they're set up, they'll come here and they'll go to a harmonic at the 12th fret, and then I'll check it with the open string. Right. The thing is,
that's not doing anything.
Well, yeah, it's like if you're only playing harmonics, that's okay, but we don't. We're playing notes.
Unless you're yes.
Yeah. So, and there's, I mean, we could go really into the weeds with a lot of things, but so what you end up doing is you start there when you're setting up a guitar, and you fret the note, so on and so forth, but you check other intervals and stuff, and you talk to the person and ask them how they play. If they're playing jazz chords or something more like something like this, maybe big pretty chords, then you're going to kind of tune that way. If you're playing AC/DC, you're going to tune a little bit differently.
So how many of your students come in and they think, all right, I'm going to learn how to play guitar, and then you're like, okay, you're going to practice tuning, and then they're like, okay, I'm done with guitar.
Back.
Well, the practice tuning is for a couple minutes. Tune your guitar when you sit down and play it, and that's it. But also understand when your guitar's out of tune.
Right, and that's important. Right.
And tune it, because I have people that ask me, it's like, well, how often should I tune? And it's like, whenever you're out of tune. I mean,
that's why there are guitar technicians in the wings tuning guitars on stage when there are live performances.
Totally.
And, when I remember a couple of years ago, it was actually Van Halen, I think, that played, and they were playing Jump, and it was completely in the wrong key because they had tuned all the guitars and instruments all screwed up. And I think David Lee Roth was still singing how the song was intended because he couldn't hear it through the monitors, and it was like a complete mess. So even at that level, you can have a whole fucked up sound if you're not tuning things properly.
Right. And so many, talking to session players, people, I don't know how deep into guitar and stuff you guys gotten, but you could tune these things different ways.
Oh yeah. ASAP loves to tune his acoustic into. Yep.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's
it's in like Nick Drake's tuning.
Yeah.
So was that Dadgad?
No, it's in like deep C, and then one of them's weird.
It's in C.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, but that'll freak out a lot of people.
Totally.
Like, I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with this, let alone.
Yeah, and it's funny because
something completely different.
When I heard of Nick Drake's tuning, somebody said, "Oh, like a song I had written sounded like Nick Drake." I had no idea who he was. Found out he had this tuning. Put my guitar in the tuning and messed up one of the strings. I put it to like F sharp instead of F, and then wrote a bunch of songs like that. So and then hand it to somebody, and they're like, "I don't know what to do with this." And it's so cool.
And what's interesting about that is, to your end of kind of just jumping into something and at least finding a starting point. I was one of those people that picked up a guitar of his that was in a screwed up tuning, or what I thought was screwed
in
up.
this tuning.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And then he's like, just mess around with it. And I did, and a song came out of it. And you kind of just have to sometimes mess around with something, even step out of your comfort zone and find your way. But I'm curious. So someone's coming to you to learn the instrument. They're now frustrated because they're like, okay, there's the tuning thing. I know you're saying that's not the predominant thing you're learning, but there's scales, there's all this other garbage. Like, how do you get them to where it's like, okay, let's focus on this, which maybe you'll even enjoy this. Try this. Let's take it down to what you can handle. Where do you start with them?
It could be a matter of looking at the proclivity of the person. Some people learn differently. Some people learn from watching. I mean, this is an oral art form, so it's very abstract. You think, what is music? How do you describe a sound, right? It's weird. It's like, we could look at the artwork here and we could say, oh, there's yellow in that or red. We might see it differently, but we're kind of on the same page with how images look and stuff. But you kind of look and see, like, is this person got more rhythm? Maybe, or is this person more, are they more melody? Things like that.
Right.
You can kind of tell.
Yeah.
You hear somebody kind of sing a little bit and like, oh, you sing? And it's like, okay, well, they might be more in tune with melody. And eventually you want to kind of cover everything or have them cover everything. But I usually start with rhythm, because without rhythm, you don't have anything. I mean,
So show us a rhythm exercise that you'd have someone do.
okay, here goes. It could be as simple as doing an eighth note exercise with an E chord like this. Let's see, let's get a good kerchug sound, metal. We're in West Hollywood, so let's do it. It's like Enter Sandman. About the same sound.
But in that, you're wanting them to focus on their right hand.
Right,
mainly.
and being-
it's just like you're just holding that E chord. You're not worrying about your left hand too much.
Right.
You're just focused on
Right. And
dancing with your right hand.
Right, and it's a very simple thing, but keeping it rhythmically in place.
Do you have people practice with a metronome? Do you lean into that or advise that?
I do. There's so many beat programs you can get. The things you can go online and do that, play with a beat. Ultimately, play with a drummer if you have a chance. That's probably one of the best things that you can do. But developing a good sense of rhythm and being aware of how you're picking new accents and things like that.
Okay, so here's the age-old question. I see when you play, you have your thumb coming over the top of the
Sure.
the
Are you
bridge.
supposed to have your thumb behind the second fret?
Yeah, no. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of guitar teachers, especially
question.
newer guitar
I broke
teachers,
that rule.
that say your thumb should not leave the middle of the neck of the guitar on the back. It should never leave that, because it'll give you more access to the lower notes on the top of the
I can't play like that.
I can't
I've
either.
literally thought of that recently, and I'm like,
Is that just a personal stylistic choice?
It all depends. It depends what style of music you're playing. If you're playing a chord that's spread out like this, if you're spreading your hand out, then you have to have your thumb behind the neck. You
Right.
just do.
Right.
But if then you come right from that chord to a bend, then look at how my hand is.
Right.
And especially for electric guitar, you have to have your thumb over the neck, so you're muting.
Right.
Sounded like the first note of Funk 49.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Also, Stairway to Heaven lead too. So
Oh,
that-
Nice.
Um,
And it's
but
probably from like 47 other songs too, right?
probably millions. We'll go back to the 70s and find all these bent E notes on the floor.
And that's actually a good point. Do you feel that like all songs are derivative of other songs at this point? There's no new music being written because there are only so many chords and notes on the guitar, or are there still?
Yes,
Yeah.
affirmative, and not necessarily in a bad way. I think people need to be more creative in flushing things out.
Yeah.
But there's only so many notes. I mean, there's Indian scales that we have 12 half steps, 12 notes here. We're dealing with in the chromatic scale. There are scales that have 17 notes in them, and they're more exotic.
And is that because of there's different spacing on the fretboards there? They have like skinnier frets.
Frets or the types of instruments they're playing, like playing an oud. which doesn't have frets. So you get into what's called microtonal music, where you don't have a note like this is C, where you can go, where you're kind of you're not a C sharp and you're not a C. It's in between.
Right.
And when you're playing blues, you actually get into these kind of things a lot. And it's one of the blues, people are like, well, the blues are easy. It's like, as a form of music, it's very easy. And it's also the hardest to play.
Well, yeah, it makes me think of the stand-up bass guitars that don't have frets, and you're kind of always dancing between the notes, and you have to still find that center point to be dancing around.
Right. Exactly. And that's where you learn to use your ear. And some people have better ears than others. It is something that can be developed. And but we're such a visually oriented society that we don't really work with people on that as they're developing. And to hear these things, to hear when a guitar's out of tune, because that drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And that's something we've stressed on this show a lot, is like, if that's the first thing we do before we do any scratch tracks. I'm like, we gotta tune the guitar.
Yeah,
it's like you can't forget to tune your guitar, especially before recording, especially before practicing. It's like so important. So shout out to John for influencing that. But I do notice something in talking to you that I think is a really great quality, that it seems that you can see what the musician is doing, like whether you're saying they rely on melody, or they're relying on rhythm. It's really interesting, and I think you can help people grow that way. And I haven't quite played with any teachers that like told me what my strengths were.
Well, I think teachers, collaborators, that kind of thing in general, if you're actually good at it, you do have that sense of intuition where you can read that off of people. You look at someone like Pharrell, who or who's the other big one that everyone goes to, Rick Rubin. And they don't necessarily, we were talking about this, have much of a hand in physically creating the music, but it's about reading people, it's about seeing where they're coming from, and then just helping them to make the appropriate tweaks to really lean into what they do best.
Such an amazing quality.
Yeah, and I think even as a guitar teacher and instrumentalist, that's a really important quality to have, like Dave was saying, to be able to see what kind of an instrumentalist this person is that's learning from you, and to be able to lean in to what they'll be able to learn best.
Right. And I think too, a great quality of being an artist or being a musician is because music is should be a collaborative form. I mean, that's we can all, especially from the pandemic, we can all cower in our homes and play, and that was an important time to do that. But at the same time, getting out here with other human beings and having a conversation, like a musical conversation, it's really cool when people start feeling that a little bit. They're like, oh my God, that's an amazing feeling. And part of that is listening. And as a society, I think we don't like to listen a lot of times.
No, and attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter. Yeah. I mean, even, I think again to that album release party we went to last night, everyone had congregated in this house specifically to hear this person do their thing. And people could not shut up for 3 or 4 songs while this guy sang his songs. And it was so disappointing that, he had a DJ that was doing some backup for him that had to be on the mic asking people to be quiet like we're a kindergarten class. And it's remarkable.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at in a lot of things. It's like, I paid my ticket for the movie too, and I if you want to dub it at home, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I don't need to hear the commentary.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's kind of lacking in music right now. And it's going to change. It's just dynamics, having loud and quiet parts. Because as opposed to having everything chopped and all of that. And use the technology. Music is, make no mistake about it. People will complain about technology in music. Technology has always moved music forward. Always.
Yeah. That's why AI, I think it'll become a tool. People are hating on technology and AI influencing music is just like, I think it will push it forward.
If you could use that as an idea generator and go, wow, well, I can look at this 100 different ways and it took me 2 minutes to do that. I'm all for it. I have no problem with that. But there's always been this argument. And when they started electrifying guitars in the 50s or even before that, they actually started in mass in the 40s, but really became popular in the 50s. It's like, you're bastardizing the music. What are you doing?
Right.
All these instruments were originally made to play some sort of jazz. Strats were for playing for playing Western swing and things. They were never thought of that. You're going to plug this into an amp and crank it.
Yeah.
Right.
All of a sudden,
It takes some maniac to come in and say, we're going to do this.
right? But look at where that's led.
Yeah.
And it was just, and people might not like it. That's okay. But a lot of people did like it.
Yeah.
And so, with keyboards, they see all this electronic gear. That's where we're at. We have these, and look at the access we have on our phones. So it's more about the integrity of the person using it than the gear itself.
Yeah, and just to backtrack for a second, when you talk about dynamics in music, that's something that I really noticed the other night when we saw Ray Isla perform live, because there were so many moments where it gets really quiet and you feel this crescendo happening, and then everything builds, and she would be like kind of starting it off on the keyboard, and then the whole band would slowly come in, and you would just have this punch moment, and it's
That's awesome.
Yeah, you just feel that. It's so visceral in the audience. Super cool.
Totally.
And
It's so important in music, man. Like dynamics, where it's like not every single note you're playing doesn't not have to be like as hard as I can hit it, or as hard.
Right.
It's
no, having variety. It's like eating the same food every day for all 3 meals. You get tired of that pretty quick. Even if it's something really good that you really like, you need variety.
Absolutely.
And dynamics is a pretty easy one to put into a composition.
Yeah.
You're not having to learn new fingering or get a new amp or anything. Hey, maybe turn down your volume or play softer, and the different sounds that you can get out of playing any instrument, but especially guitar, playing it differently is a tremendous asset and needs to be explored more.
Absolutely.
And I think it will. I think we're going to come into a different era of music, and it's going to be driven by artists who are willing to do these kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of starts with the what is the guy's name that can take like a tone, and then create like a whole song. You know who I'm talking about? No, huh?
But how do we start to push the envelope?
Do you guys? I mean, are you currently writing songs?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of jam sessions on the show.
I write on my own.
He writes on his own. We don't necessarily always know where to start when we have a jam session,
Right.
and we've argued a lot about what key is this in, and do we need to know the key to be able to just feel something out and start, and then
there's a whole aspect of like, because I used to just start on my acoustic guitar and like whatever I felt, had no idea what key I was playing in, whatever came. And then I would go to a studio, I had no idea what key I'm playing in, and then like the engineer would say, hey, I'm going to add bass or something, what key are you playing? I don't know. So then we would spend time figuring that out. And then, we started doing the Sapo sessions, and I kind of figured just start in a key already, and then I would see like all the notes on the scale and like all the chords that are incorporated in that scale.
And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just I'm not that proficient when it comes to the intricacies of keys and things like that, but I can kind of sometimes feel out where a song should go or how a song should start. So I was much more in the idea of like, okay, let's just play around and we'll find something that works. And he's like, well, that makes it really hard to structure the rest of the song if you don't know where you've started, what's supposed to be in that key.
Well, one of the I'll ask you that, guys, this, and it's something I tell people, whether they're students or not, is like learn where the notes are on the instrument. And do you guys know that? Or are you proficient in that?
I mean, I know Eddie ate dynamite. Goodbye, Eddie.
Okay,
So-
great.
I know
Those are-
Easter
great.
bunnies get drunk after Easter.
Okay. So we know the names of the strings. I know how to say all the notes in between, so I know all the bar chords
Right,
as a
okay,
result.
good,
So yeah, I know a good amount
Okay,
of
good.
what's that? I know Eddie's a fool. Yeah.
Every awesome dude goes boarding every day.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, there's so many
Someone told me
acronyms.
that one. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I hadn't heard that, so I like that. No, but so having an idea of where you're going on the neck, it can help. It can help a lot.
Yeah.
Because then you can communicate with other people.
Sure.
And when you get into things talking about keys, like when you're getting into melodies or vocals, like having an idea where your vocal range is. So if you're writing a song, you're like, yeah, I can't go that low,
Right.
or it's going way too high, kind of thing, and fitting it in.
Yeah, I mean, my problem had become that I could definitely figure out some sort of a chord progression for us to use as the basis of a song, but I couldn't tell you what key that was in. I was like, I could tell you every chord that was,
Here's the next question: is generally the
starting chord the
first
same as the
chord
key.
or the root note of the chord the key?
Generally, not always, but generally, yeah. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it, and just kind of looking at the chords that you're playing. If you have a 4-note progression, here I'm going to hand this.
Yeah.
So if we're doing something like here, I'll do Holiday from Green Day, because it's a good. This progression has been abused, beaten. It probably should be taken out of, not because of Green Day, but just so many artists have, and you'll hear it. It's like,
Right.
you've heard that
Yeah.
a million times. There's that guy who does like 50 songs off of that chord progression.
Ed Sheeran
Yeah.
did one where he was in court because someone was saying that he ripped off their song, and he goes, "I'm going to show you how 100 songs use the same 4-chord progression."
Right.
Exactly. So when you kind of get a grouping of chords, you can kind of start making some assumptions of where you're at note wise within the tune, whether it's something like this. Simple, what's called a 1-4-5 progression. You play it anywhere, right? Now the
Right.
interesting, I'll take this back. Thanks. The interesting thing is with guitar or with bass, if you're coming up with a riff, now it gets a little tricky, because if you're doing a riff that involves open strings, like you think of like old bands like Led Zeppelin or something, or even Van Halen, they're doing things that specifically need particular locations on the guitar. What kind of pegs you into a key, like a key of E or key of A. There's certain,
Like you're talking about something like Black Dog that starts on an open string.
right, and it's pinned to that key, and you can't just go, well, I can't sing it in that key, so we're going to move it a half step down or something like that. What you'd probably end up doing is just retuning the guitar to accommodate that.
Because otherwise you're transposing the entire song, which can get maddening.
Right, and with like rock and things like that, or a song like Enter Sandman, they use a lot of open strings in these chords, so it's not like, well, let's just do it in the key of F.
Right.
It's a lot easier to transpose on a keyboard than, and you can use capos and stuff. That's, some people think capoing is cheating. It's not. It's just a different way of expression. It's fine. But being, kind of constructing, and especially if you're talking about playing in a guitar that was retuned, maybe out of what, is not standard tuning. That's pretty cool, because you also, you can kind of come up with like a one finger kind of riff.
Yeah.
And it'll take you to a completely different place of something that you never intended to write, and all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, this thing sounds great.
Yeah. Well, and that is what I felt in terms of, again, when he had that strange tuning on the guitar and I started to play with it, and he's like, just go for it. It does take you outside the box and allow you to do things that you never thought, you never had those inclinations because you weren't in that zone. You're never being tested in that way.
Right.
And some pretty cool stuff can come out of that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you know what drop D? D tune?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Like drop D, and then all of a sudden the grunge.
Right.
What do you got going on over there? Sorry.
Some feedback.
Sorry about that.
All right. Well,
No worries.
we have taken a lot of your time. I really appreciate you coming in today. I do want to kind of wrap things up with. Okay, I know we got our time guy in the corner telling me how long we've been on the air. I do want to kind of wrap things up with what makes you happy in terms of when you sit down and you want to play something just to kind of like get the lead out, as they say. What's your go-to in terms of like, all right, I'm just gonna play for me. This is what I'm gonna play. Is it scales? Is it actual music?
Oh, it's definitely actual music.
Blues chords.
Yeah. It could be blues chords. It could be retuning the guitar and just messing with something, just feeling it. Generally, I'll do it more on acoustic guitar than I will on electric.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I'll pick
Is
up.
it still an Ovation?
No. The Ovation's long gone.
Yeah.
I sold it to a guy who I think is in New Hampshire.
No, you're a Martin guy, aren't you?
Yeah, I play Martins. I have a Taylor, but I'm mainly Martins, and I usually play my wife's guitar, which is
Hers
funny.
is the
Oh, no kidding.
She has kind of an inexpensive Martin that I got for her about almost 20 years ago. She doesn't play it much, but I play it all the time because it's hanging on the wall.
I was about to say, is that
Yep.
the one that's
Yep.
like sitting out?
Yeah.
And since you said that to me, I've made a point like of either leaving my case open because I don't want to leave the Taylor out all day long, but like maybe I shouldn't worry about that. But that's why he came over and wrote a song one
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
And
no,
I
the
literally-
instruments
and
being
it was because of
accessible.
you
Yeah.
that I'm like, I'm just leaving this shit open or I'm leaving the bass there
Right,
so I
right.
could walk by and just pick it up.
Yeah.
And I'll say like this time because I get a lot of these questions, especially with acoustic guitars, and I don't want to take too much more time, but it's an important thing. It's like leave them out if you can. I mean, from my side of things, it's like I would tell you to put it in a case and take care of
Right.
everything. But those are the guitars you generally don't play.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's the same with me too. And if there's the one that's leaning against the wall, that's the one that gets played all the time.
Yep.
It's all dusty and gross and everything. Dogs put their nose on it, whatever. It's still that's the one.
But
that
it gets that play.
but it gets played.
Yeah.
And
All right. So show everyone what you play when you're sitting down to have some fun yourself. I want to hear a little bit of
man,
John's
okay.
grunge.
it might not be grunge.
It might not be grunge. All right. Let's hear where you go with it.
Could be. I don't know, man. Let me see.
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I was gonna say, you want a little groove? I can give you a little drum beat.
Yeah, give me a look. Give me
Yeah.
Give me a little drum beat, please.
All right, ASAP, set him up with some drums. Would you do us a favor over here, guys out here?
What kind of tempo do you like? You know, like 100 BPM,
I don't-
120.
keep it around 100. We'll keep
Okay.
it slower. It's earlier in the day.
100.
Musicians are night creatures, so
That's right. we're just waking up at the end of this interview, man. Yeah, you are a day walker. All right, we got a little drum groove going.
I know your guitar went away, but I'm gonna bring it back here in a second.
All right, bring John back for us, man. I gotta learn some of those
Yeah.
jazz chords, man.
That's good, man.
So do you? I saw that you have a poster for like a promo for a band spot that you had at some bar or something. Do you still perform live, and can people see you out with the guys jamming?
Yeah, definitely. A week from tonight, next Saturday, we're playing at this place, Therapy at the Roar Room. It's on Foothill Boulevard. I think it's 3645 Foothill Boulevard.
Is this something people have to get tickets in advance, or they can just
they
kind of
come out,
show up?
hang out. Great place. Usually we play the second Saturday of every month, which would be tonight. But
And is that all covers?
yeah, for that project, we're doing all covers. And then 2 weeks from tonight, I'm playing with my friend Chris and my son. We're going to be playing over at the Kibitz Room.
Cool. I didn't know you played with your
Yeah.
son.
Oh,
That's
the
awesome.
Kibitz Room
Yeah.
attached to Cantor's, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
My friend Daniel, he has a band, Bad Wheelhouse. They play there the final Saturday of every month. He's invited us to come out and jam with him, so we're going to
Cool.
be playing that. So that's what we got going. We're going to be playing in the Roaring Room for the rest of the year. We play there every month.
Awesome.
And then we do other gigs in between. But
Oh, we got to go, Dave.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
gotta
we'll
go.
definitely have to show up. And if
The
you're out
intention is
there,
to go.
the intention is to go.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Hey, anytime anyone can make it, man, I'm happy. And you guys will have a good time.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Cool-
Absolutely,
cool, funky
man.
little place, and Sam,
Absolutely.
guy who owns it's really totally cool. So
Well, yeah, it sounds like a great time, and we're definitely going to
100%.
try to make it over there. And I think if anyone's in the LA area and they want to meet up with us, meet up with John, listen to some good music, you should come out too.
absolutely.
I think also, man, it'd be really cool to just do like another session at some point, have you back on the show, or we
Oh,
like
I'd love
just
to,
do like
yeah.
an actual like
Yeah, I got
like song.
I got
you know,
caught up
like
so
where-
much
where
in
we
the
do like a little production, because like I was gonna ask you, do you help people produce ever? Like
yeah,
from like
I work with people on their projects, either playing or even just advice.
yeah.
You know, hey,
Yeah.
check this out. What can we do?
Like you sit in on studio sessions, because that's kind of where I'm imagining. Like, I think it'd be there's magic that can happen. It's like you got to put yourself in the situation for it to happen, and
Right.
I feel like something really cool could.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
I got
yeah.
so caught up in talking to John and asking him questions that we didn't leave enough time for the jamming because I was very interested in a lot of what you
Totally,
had to say.
totally.
But we should definitely do
and I think-
another session where we're doing some more
A
music.
thing you and I
Love it.
spoke about a lot about last year was taking some of the jams that we had and like, because that's where we'll get stuck sometimes. Is like you just make a loop, or you're making like a phrase, and then it's like, okay, where does it go next?
Right,
And
we
like,
need
how
a
do
bridge. We need
How do we like make that part? And I was gonna
structure.
start asking you questions of like where to, like how that all works, but that's probably like a whole rabbit hole.
That's a whole rabbit hole.
I'd love to come back and just play because it's funny just sitting here playing. It's like I feel stiff and I'm like not feeling creative.
Listen, it takes us a long time sometimes to find that groove when we're doing these jam sessions.
Totally.
And Dan,
Like you want to stand up and get around, you know,
Right,
yeah,
move around,
kind of
yeah,
like
yeah.
be over here, you know, put the
Yeah.
strap on, play the guitar, like
put the strap on. Easy does it. But, no, Dan over
Mike
here,
Peggy over there, Dave.
always calls them the dink dink sessions because we're dink dink on the notes.
We need to change that.
Yeah,
we
we-
need to get something going.
Yeah, and
yeah.
so you know it takes a while to get the engine really revving, but
yeah, there's like one that there's one that we did where Dave had a bass line in his head, and then we like transposed it and like added to it, and then it's like just this loop over and
Yeah.
over. So it's like, where does it go? And that's just it.
yeah. I mean, right now it's good for a little commercial spot,
which is what it was used for.
right.
Yeah. But that's all it is that. So it's like it needs like other phrases or like, you know, that's kind of what we get stuck into on this
is making
show
a lot of loops.
is just making loops. And
Yeah.
I was actually watching YouTube videos one day and like trying to learn more about guitar and do all that, and stumbled upon a John Mayer video where he was like, a great way to waste time is make loops. And I'm like, damn it, David, we've been wasting a whole year of time making loops.
But I
sometimes-
disagree. It wasn't a waste.
Sometimes in that,
Louis Capaldi.
lyrics just fall out of you.
Louis Capaldi is who I was thinking of earlier, I think. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
And loops are a great way to get going, though.
Yeah.
But you can get stuck in a loop too.
Totally.
So,
Yes.
But I mean, if you could take that loop idea and just sit at an acoustic guitar and just start messing without the sound of the keyboards or anything else, and play with the chords or the bass or something, you're much more likely to come into playing something different off of that. Especially just sitting on a guitar, because now you've limited yourself.
Right.
And you're like, okay, well, I've got this thing. Try playing it differently. Try different chord voicings, and just see where it takes you, without having. And then go back to the loop. Maybe start stripping stuff away and start messing with it, and thinking, okay, well, we want to take this, to a chorus. Is the loop the chorus? Do we need a verse?
Often that's like what happened is like sometimes I would be like, that would end up being the chorus. And then it's just like you would move that all the way down and then
And
like
build a
just
song around it.
lead up to that
Right,
point.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it kind of like, is this an intro? Is and you could have looping chord progressions. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's like, are you getting bored with it? Because if you're getting bored with it, probably other people are getting bored with would get bored with it too. Or it could be that you're just so used to hearing it that you don't want to hear it anymore. I mean, there's all that aspect of things too. So we're talking about getting sick of hearing our own voices or whatever. I'm there. I'm with you. And I've had other people, other producers, people I've worked with, I'll play something and I think it's garbage. And they're like, no, that's it. And
Isn't that always funny when
wild.
people perceive something so differently than you perceived it? I've had interviews that I think didn't go well, and people be like, "Oh, that was really interesting."
See, but
No
it's
shit.
all the trash that you've told yourself about it that no one else is tied to.
Right.
And has that narrative that you've put on yourself. And like that's what I talked about with the guy on the sidewalk in that brief time where I gave him the card right before the show. It's very interesting
I
conversation.
feel like there was something with Thomas Aaron about that with the imaginary haters.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
It's like, who told you
yeah,
that?
right.
Who told
you're,
you
You're
that?
making those things
That-
up in your head.
Yeah. You're the only person that told yourself that.
Right, because you haven't even put anything out yet, and you're just
Right.
building up this sense of negativity.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for our own work, we're our own worst enemy a lot of times. And so
Absolutely.
you gotta, it's good that you're putting stuff down. And you need to, because you'll look at some of this stuff probably a couple of years from now and look at your files and things that you've done, and you're like, wow, we're doing that idea, but we're doing it so much better.
Yeah, no, it
Totally.
is cool to see the
Totally.
progression, and that's something that's been cool to see. We were talking about the other day just with respect to this show.
Yeah.
I mean, we started in his kitchen, in an apartment, you know, and now we're in this great space in West Hollywood,
This is
and
awesome.
yeah,
it's a
super
great-
cool.
And I really appreciate you coming out, man, because, like, you know, we'll have to go back now and find all the episodes where I mentioned you and John's rescue guitar and repair.
Yeah,
Do
'cause
like
there were a
scissor
lot of
cut.
them.
Yeah. And I'm
We've
like,
been
we're
talking
gonna
about
get-
you for a long
we're gonna
time.
get him
Oh,
on the
man.
show.
Yeah, right.
And now, like, I really feel that we do need to do the music session.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're definitely doing
like,
jam.
you know,
That would be awesome.
Just
I'd
the
like to
whole
bring-
show is that.
Yeah, bring in a guitar and
Yeah.
stuff and get a little loose and play around. That would
Yeah,
be a
it's super
blast.
I
cool.
think it'd be a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, shit, we're always looking for more musicians to collaborate with. So even if your son wanted to come in, you say you play with him.
Yeah.
That'd be
Well,
awesome.
Yeah, we'll do a whole thing.
All right, fantastic.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming
John.
down today. It's been a real pleasure. Really, really cool
I
stuff.
think you have some sponsors to thank, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to thank our brand partners. We've got Talago. Go to drinktalago.com if you want to check them out. We've got Spirit Punks Vodka. They do gin. They do whiskey. Go to spiritpunks.io to check out more about them. Or you could just go to sapostudios.xyz. Everything you see on that page, well, not everything, but most of the things
Most
on
of
that page are clickable. And so
Behind
you can
John there.
check out all of our brand partners there. We've got Cookies Brentwood, great dispensary. Go down to Cookies Brentwood and get yourself some fine marijuana.
Sapo Sessions. You get a discount.
Little promo code
Yeah.
Sapo Sessions. Get
Yeah.
yourself some 25% off.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, we have the art department. Well, yes. Well, I always mention Notorious Frogs, and I definitely have to mention. Thank you, Dan.
And thank you to Dan.
And thank you to
Toby.
Dan for running the switcher. We had a really interesting interview with Dan where we were illuminated on a lot of things that we probably should have known but didn't. And that episode will be out shortly on all the streaming services.
It was actually one of my mom's favorite episodes.
It was a great
She said,
episode. Yeah, it was
And
really cool.
My mom's listened to all of them.
Yeah,
So-
she has devout fan.
Yes. So Dan, very interesting.
But yeah,
life.
before we neglect to do so, I definitely do want to thank Keith Botha and the art department, Botha, for always having our back and giving us a space to broadcast out of, and the Notorious Frogs, who have just been our family for the.
It helped spurred this whole idea of where we're at and what we're doing, and they've been nothing but supportive of any outrageous idea we have.
And most of them are outrageous.
Yeah, but we're sitting in this thing together, and it feels really good to have people around us that are rooting in our corner.
Absolutely. And last but not least, we could not do this without all of you in the audience. So thank you so much for being here for the live show. If you're listening on the replay, thank you to Guapo in the audience for
We have one
audience member today, Guapo in the audience, who's a friend, a fellow musician. Go and check out Guapo's music.
Yeah.
But yeah, we really appreciate you being here for another Saturday. And however you're listening to this or watching it, whether it be on YouTube, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate you tuning in. Tune in next Saturday for another show at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on X, aka Twitter, and we'll see you then. Thank you so much. Sapo Studios out.
Minute or forever's not a date, and it's hard to make believe that I'm smiling underneath. Don't forget me in our story, 'cause I'm rooting now. I'm hearing how you're striving in your world, and I'm so glad you showed them what you know, and you believed you'd make it so.